Some people can talk to you for an hour and still tell you almost nothing. And some people can say 3 sentences and reveal exactly who they are. Most people never notice the difference because most people are listening for words. They hear the compliment, they notice the smile, they trust the tone, they accept the performance. But the Stoics understood something that still escapes most people now. Human beings are always revealing themselves. Not only in what they say, but in what they repeat, in what they avoid, in what irritates them, in how they treat people beneath their status, in the silence after a question, in the small delay between what they feel and what they choose to show. That is where the truth lives. And once you learn to see it, you stop getting hypnotized by charm. You stop confusing confidence with character. You stop explaining away what you already noticed. And slowly, quietly, you begin to understand people more clearly than they understand themselves. Not to manipulate them, not to become cold, not to turn every conversation into suspicion, but to protect your peace, to sharpen your judgment, to stop suffering for avoidable reasons. Because the truth is simple. People are always telling you who they are. The question is whether you are calm enough to notice. And no, this is not about becoming paranoid. It is about becoming difficult to deceive. Why most people misread others. Before you can read people well, you have to understand why most people fail. And the reason is not lack of intelligence. It is lack of discipline. Most people try to read the surface. The smile, the confidence, the polished sentence, the warm energy, the perfect first impression. But first impressions are often performances, not always false, but rarely complete. Human beings learn very early which versions of themselves get rewarded. Confidence gets attention, warmth gets trust, humility gets approval, competence gets opportunity. So people develop social masks. They refine them. They get so used to wearing them that eventually the performance feels natural even to them. And that is why reading people is difficult for the average person, because the average person mistakes the mask for the face. The Stoics did not make that mistake. They knew that appearances are unstable. They knew that emotion distorts perception. They knew that hope is one of the most dangerous filters in human judgment. Because when you want someone to be good, you will edit what you see. When you want someone to love you, you will excuse what should concern you. When you fear being alone, you will call obvious patterns confusing. When you want harmony, you will call disrespect stress. This is why so many people are not actually bad at noticing. They are bad at accepting. They saw the contradiction. They heard the strange tone. They felt the tension. But instead of trusting perception, they negotiated with it. The Stoic mind does something harder. It does not beg reality to be kinder than it is. It observes, it waits. It names things accurately, then it chooses wisely. So if you want to read people better, the first lesson is this. Do not ask only what are they saying. Ask what are they repeating? What are they protecting? What changes when pressure appears? What remains true across time? Because words are immediate, patterns are expensive, and expensive things are harder to fake. Most people are not hard to read. They are hard to accept. That difference will save you years. People speak twice, once with words, once with behavior. Every person speaks in 2 languages. The first is verbal, I am happy for you, I support you. I am not upset, you can trust me, I do not care about that. The second language is behavioral. That one speaks through timing, through tension, through hesitation, through consistency, through what happens when there is nothing to gain. And in many cases, the second language is the honest one. This is where so many people go wrong. They hear the first language and ignore the second. They believe the sentence and dismiss the signal. But behavior has a different relationship with truth than words do. Words can be prepared. Words can be edited. Words can be selected for effect. Behavior leaks. It leaks in the pause before an answer. It leaks in the body leaning away while the mouth says yes. It leaks in the smile that appears too late. It leaks in the support that exists only when support is easy. Consider someone who keeps saying all the right things. They say they are committed. They say they believe in the future. They say they want the same things you want. And if you judged by language alone, everything sounds perfect. But there is friction everywhere else. The enthusiasm has no weight. The eye contact keeps breaking at strange moments. The agreement comes too quickly, like something rehearsed. And whenever the conversation touches commitment, there is the faintest delay before they answer. Nothing dramatic, nothing you could point to and call proof, but enough. Because truth often moves smoothly, resistance usually needs a second to organize itself. That second matters. The Stoics trained themselves to notice such things because they understood a brutal fact about life. What hurts us is not only other people's deception, it is our cooperation with the deception. We help illusions survive when we ignore what does not fit the story we want. So from now on, remember this. When someone speaks, do not listen only to the content. Listen to the congruence. Do their words match their rhythm? Does their praise match their face? Does their loyalty exist only in speech or in sacrifice? Does their character survive inconvenience? Because human beings tell the truth in fragments long before they tell it outright. Watch what they do when there is nothing to gain. If you want to know someone's polished self, watch them around important people. If you want to know their real self, watch them where there is no reward. This may be the clearest test of character that exists. Anyone can be kind when kindness is profitable. Anyone can be generous when others are watching. Anyone can be patient when reputation is on the line. But remove the audience, remove the reward, remove the chance to impress. Now you begin meeting the person. Watch how they speak to waiters, to cleaners, to assistants, to customer service workers, to strangers who inconvenience them, to people who cannot improve their position in life. That is where masks become expensive to maintain, and expensive masks eventually slip. Consider someone who was admired by almost everyone around them. They were warm in public, attentive in conversation, quick with names, always ready with charm. People called them unusually kind. Then one night, in a setting with no one important watching, they dealt with someone who made a small mistake, and in less than 10 seconds, the whole image collapsed. The patience vanished, the warmth vanished, the respect vanished. Nothing huge happened, no dramatic explosion, just a tone, a look, a kind of casual contempt. But contempt is enough, because contempt is never accidental. It tells you what someone thinks they are entitled to. The Stoics believed virtue is real only when it costs you something. Patience that survives convenience is not virtue. Respect that depends on status is not respect. Kindness that disappears when no one is watching is not kindness. It is strategy, and strategy can look beautiful for a while, but it is never stable. So stop being too impressed by how people act upward. Watch how they act downward. Watch the moments too small for performance. Watch the places where their ego thinks it is safe to relax. That is where truth stops dressing well. And once you see how someone treats the powerless, you do not need a long explanation of who they are. You already know enough. How someone treats the person who cannot help them is not a detail. It is a biography in miniature. Silence is a test most people fail. Here is one of the strangest truths about human nature. The more comfortable you are with silence, the more people reveal. Most people are deeply uncomfortable with quiet. The moment a conversation pauses, they rush to rescue it. They explain too much. They backtrack. They justify. They leak. They fill space with words they did not intend to say. And if you understand that, silence becomes a powerful instrument, not because it forces truth, but because it removes distraction. Picture someone telling you a story, maybe about why they left a job, why their last relationship failed, why someone betrayed them, why everything in their life always seems to go wrong. Most people react too early. They interrupt. They challenge details. They offer advice. They start defending themselves against a story that is not even about them. But the wiser move is often much quieter. Let them finish. Then pause, just a second longer than feels socially comfortable. That tiny silence creates pressure, and pressure reveals structure. People start adding details they were not asked for. They clarify too much. They expose resentment. They reveal insecurity. They contradict themselves. Sometimes they confess accidentally. Not because you trapped them, because silence made them face themselves for half a moment, and most people are not trained for that. This is why calm people often unsettle others, not because they are threatening, but because they do not rush to reduce tension, and tension is revealing. Consider an argument where one person talked continuously, explaining, defending, trying to sound reasonable. The other person barely said anything. They listened. They asked one short question. Then they stayed quiet. And slowly the first person unraveled. They went from composed to reactive, from clear to cluttered, from certainty to self-exposure. That is when it becomes obvious. Silence does not just reveal information, it reveals stability. The Stoics understood restraint as a form of strength. Not every moment deserves a reaction. Not every statement requires immediate response. Not every silence should be filled with noise. Because if you are ruled by the urge to respond instantly, you become easy to manage. But if you can remain still, you begin to see beneath the performance. So the next time someone is speaking, try this. Do not interrupt. Do not show your conclusion too early. Let the sentence end. Pause, then say softly, "Go on," or "Tell me more." Simple words, enormous effect. Because many people do not reveal themselves when they feel attacked. They reveal themselves when they feel safe enough or pressured enough to keep talking, and silence creates both. Emotion exposes priority. People can hide their plans, they can hide their opinions, they can hide parts of their history, but what they struggle to hide is what hits them emotionally. And that matters because emotion is not random. Emotion points. It points toward value, toward fear, toward insecurity, toward attachment, toward identity. Watch what changes someone's energy. Mention a certain name and their tone tightens. Question a certain topic and their posture shifts. Praise someone else and something cold appears behind the smile. Take away control and they become someone new. That change is information, not final proof, but information. The Stoics paid enormous attention to disturbance because disturbance reveals dependence. Marcus Aurelius repeatedly reminded himself that when something outside him controlled his emotional state, that was not freedom. The same principle helps you read others. Observe what consistently provokes strong reaction, not once, repeatedly. A person obsessed with status becomes sensitive when status is threatened. A person dependent on praise becomes uneasy when attention moves elsewhere. A person attached to control becomes sharp when plans change. A person still owned by the past changes completely when certain memories are touched. And here is where many people make a mistake. They focus on the reaction itself and miss what it points to. But the reaction is not the deepest truth. The deeper truth is the attachment behind it. Ask yourself, what is being threatened here? Approval, image, power, security, control, belonging, superiority, the illusion of being unbothered. Because people defend what they secretly worship, sometimes with anger, sometimes with humor, sometimes with withdrawal, sometimes with passive aggression, sometimes with silence that has far more emotion in it than words ever could. Consider someone who always seemed relaxed, cool, detached, unbothered. Nothing appeared to affect them until they were ignored. The moment they felt excluded, everything changed. Their calmness hardened, their responses sharpened, their confidence turned into performance. And suddenly it becomes clear, they did not merely enjoy attention, they depended on it. That is a massive difference. This is why reading emotion carefully can save you from confusion. Because once you know what someone is attached to, you understand what drives them, and what drives them predicts them. That colleague who overreacts to disrespect, respect is central to their identity. That partner who spirals when plans shift, control creates safety for them. That friend who cannot tolerate another person's success, comparison governs them more than they admit. This is not about judging human weakness. It is about recognizing human structure. And here is the Stoic twist. Use this method on yourself first. What provokes you too easily? What praise do you crave too much? What criticism cuts too deep? What loss feels unbearable? What silence makes you anxious? What rejection becomes obsession? Because until you know what owns you, you remain readable in the worst possible way. The people hardest to manipulate are not the ones who study others obsessively. They are the ones who have studied themselves honestly. When people become emotional, they are not only reacting, they are revealing what their inner life is built around. Listen to how they speak about people who are not there. One of the most accurate ways to read someone is also one of the most overlooked. Listen to how they speak about people who are absent. Not what they claim their values are, what they actually do with another person's name when that person is not in the room. Do they become generous? Do they become careless? Do they become cruel? Do they enjoy diminishing others? Do they reveal private information too easily? Does every story somehow end with them as the victim, the hero, or the only rational one? Pay attention, because when someone speaks about absent people, you are hearing their unguarded relational style. The person who casually betrays someone else's privacy is showing you what your privacy will mean to them later. The person who constantly speaks with contempt is showing you the emotional atmosphere they live in. The person who always has a small, cutting remark hidden inside a story about someone else is not merely describing people. They are rehearsing how they relate to the world. Marcus Aurelius understood this well. He had enormous power, yet he wrote constantly about discipline of speech. Why? Because language is moral exposure. Speech does not only reveal what we think of others, it reveals what kind of mind we carry. A person who speaks generously when nothing can be gained by it is usually generous. A person who becomes animated only when gossip begins is showing you where their appetite lives. And the most dangerous part is that many people mistake this for closeness. Someone shares sharp private observations with you and you feel included. You feel chosen. You feel like you are seeing the real them. Maybe you are, but if that real self feeds on careless talk, mockery, or betrayal, then what you are seeing is not intimacy. It is warning. Never forget this. The way someone speaks of others in their absence is often a preview of how they will speak of you in yours, and previews should be taken seriously. The past leaks through the present. If you want to understand who someone is now, pay attention to the shape of what formed them. People carry history in their nervous system, not just in memory, in reactions, in defenses, in assumptions, in timing, in the strange intensity of certain responses. Old betrayal becomes new suspicion. Old humiliation becomes new defensiveness. Old abandonment becomes new overattachment. Old chaos becomes a desperate need for control. The past does not always introduce itself clearly. It leaks, sometimes through fear, sometimes through overreaction, sometimes through a tenderness someone is ashamed to show, sometimes through a hardness they mistake for strength. This matters because if you ignore history, you may misread the present. But if you become too sympathetic to history, you may excuse patterns that will still hurt you. That balance is essential. Stoicism is not naive compassion. It is clear-eyed compassion. It says, understand where people come from, but do not surrender your judgment in the process. Listen carefully when people speak about former partners, old friends, family, past jobs, betrayal, failure. What is the emotional shape of the story? Reflection or only resentment? Responsibility or only blame? Growth or identity built around injury? A wounded past does not automatically make someone dangerous. Sometimes suffering produces depth, patience, gentleness, discipline. But sometimes suffering, when left unexamined, becomes bitterness, manipulation, suspicion, cruelty. Pain does not automatically mature a person. Sometimes it simply hardens them. And this is why the Stoics placed so much emphasis on inner work, not because suffering can be avoided, but because suffering without self-examination becomes poison. So when you read someone, do not ask only what happened to them. Also ask what did they become because of it. That question changes everything. Because many people are not reacting to you personally. They are reacting through you. You touched a wound they were already carrying. And once you understand that, you stop taking every behavior as a verdict on your worth. Not everything is about you. Sometimes you are simply standing in front of someone whose past is still louder than the present. Compassion matters, but compassion without discernment turns suffering into permission, and that is not wisdom. Watch them when they do not get their way. Nothing reveals a person faster than frustration. Not success, not comfort, not charm, frustration. Because when life stops cooperating, performance becomes harder. Watch what happens when someone is interrupted, corrected, ignored, delayed, told no, made to wait, forced to adapt, denied the outcome they expected. Can they regulate themselves, or do they punish the environment? This matters more than most people realize, because anyone can appear mature when reality is agreeing with them. But maturity is not measured by how someone behaves when everything is going smoothly. Maturity is measured by what happens when reality resists them. Consider someone who goes from magnetic to alarming over a minor inconvenience. A plan changed. That was all. No disaster, no betrayal, no loss, just inconvenience. But the shift is immediate. Coldness, blame, subtle cruelty, passive aggression dressed as reason. And in that moment, months of uncertainty become clarity. Because pressure does not create character, it exposes it. The Stoics trained themselves for this exact reason. They practiced meeting delay without panic, insult without collapse, disappointment without drama, loss without losing themselves. Why? Because if your peace depends on reality obeying you, you will be fragile in a world that makes no such promise. And fragile people often become destructive when they cannot control outcomes. So ask yourself, whenever you are trying to understand someone, how do they behave when reality says no? That question will tell you how much of their personality is discipline and how much is just convenience. The answer matters, because people who cannot handle small frustration often become dangerous under greater pressure. The gap between words and patterns is the final truth. This is the most important skill of all, because it gathers everything. The pauses, the reactions, the silence, the treatment of others, the frustration, the stories about the past, the language about absent people, all of it leads here. Watch the gap between what they say and what they repeatedly do. Almost anyone can say the right thing once. People know what honesty sounds like, what loyalty sounds like, what humility sounds like, what love sounds like, what integrity sounds like. The language is easy, the pattern is not. A person says loyalty matters. Do they remain loyal when it costs them something? A person says honesty matters. Do they tell the truth when a lie would protect their image? A person says they care. Do they show up when care becomes inconvenient? A person says family matters. Do they make time for the people they claim to value? A person says peace matters. Why does conflict follow them everywhere? This is where so many people get trapped, because inconsistency keeps hope alive. It gives you just enough good moments to doubt the pattern. One week they are warm, the next week distant. One day committed, the next evasive. One moment generous, the next resentful. And because human beings are emotional, they tend to cling to the version they prefer. The apology, the beautiful explanation, the one amazing conversation, the brief period when everything felt clear. But the Stoic asks a harder question. Not what do I hope is true? What is consistently true? That question can save you years. Consider someone who always had persuasive explanations. If they disappeared, there was a reason. If they contradicted themselves, there was a reason. If they let someone down, there was a reason. And each reason sounded believable on its own. But eventually the structure underneath becomes visible. The details kept changing. The pattern did not. And patterns matter more than excuses. Believe repeated behavior more than emotional language, because repeated behavior is expensive. Words are cheap. Marcus Aurelius warned himself not to waste time discussing virtue. Become virtuous. That principle works both inward and outward. Do not be seduced by declarations. Study evidence. Do not build trust from speeches. Build it from repeated proof. Because character is not what someone claims in favorable conditions. Character is what remains true when conditions change. And time, more than any clever question, reveals that. Before you read others, read yourself. Now comes the part most people do not want to hear. Everything we have said about other people also applies to you. Your pauses reveal you. Your emotional triggers reveal you. Your treatment of people beneath your status reveals you. Your language about people who are absent reveals you. Your behavior under frustration reveals you. Your patterns reveal you. And this is why Stoicism is not really about mastering other people. It is about mastering perception. The person with unexamined fear reads betrayal everywhere. The person desperate to be loved reads sincerity where none exists. The person addicted to approval ignores what should be obvious. The person who has not faced their own contradictions becomes fascinated by everyone else's. Epictetus taught that the first work is always inward, because the self doing the observing is never neutral. We do not see the world as it is. We see it through the quality of our own judgment. That means if you want to read others clearly, you must reduce distortion within yourself. You must know what you want so badly that it blinds you. You must know what pain you keep projecting outward. You must know which truths you resist because they threaten your comfort. If you are uncomfortable with silence, you will never hear what quiet reveals. If you rush toward conclusions, you will confuse projection with perception. If you have not faced the gap between your own values and your own behavior, you will be strangely tolerant of that same gap in others. Self-knowledge does not make you softer in judgment. It makes you cleaner, less reactive, less naive, less easily manipulated by hope, fear, loneliness, flattery, or fantasy. And that is the deepest Stoic advantage, not becoming suspicious of everyone, becoming so inwardly steady that you can finally see without distortion. Because the hardest person to read is often not the stranger, it is the one in the mirror. The Stoic way to see people clearly. So how do you read people without them knowing? Not with tricks, not with domination, not with fake psychology. You do it by becoming still enough to notice what restless people miss. You stop chasing words, you watch behavior. You notice what people do when there is nothing to gain. You study what provokes them emotionally. You listen to how they speak about people who are absent. You pay attention to the shape of their past. You watch what happens when they do not get their way. You hold silence long enough for truth to move. And above all, you study the gap between what they say and what their patterns prove. That is how clarity is built, not from one dramatic moment, from quiet attention over time. Marcus Aurelius spent his life reminding himself to see things plainly, not as he feared them, not as he wished them to be, as they are. And that is the real skill, to see people as they are, not as charm presents them, not as loneliness edits them, not as hope negotiates with them, not as fear exaggerates them. As they are. Because when you finally learn to do that, something inside you becomes peaceful. You stop being surprised by patterns that were visible from the start. You stop trying to talk yourself out of what reality already showed you. You stop wasting years on masks. And that peace is not cynicism. It is wisdom. The kind that allows you to trust more carefully, love more intelligently, and walk through the world with your eyes open. So the next time someone speaks to you, listen carefully, not only to the words. Listen to the rhythm, the hesitation, the appetite, the resentment, the stillness, the contradiction, the way they handle frustration, the way they speak of others, the way they behave when no reward is waiting. Because whether they know it or not, they are telling you everything. And once you learn to see it, you become very difficult to deceive. Practice it quietly, observe more, react less, judge slower, see clearer. And if one lesson stays with you most, let it be this. Words make impressions, patterns reveal character,